Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Welcome to Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan, and thank you again for joining us for another free podcast edition, sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company located in Kissimmee, Florida. We are honored to have Edward Asner, who was born in Toronto, Canada, and raised in San Diego, California. She's the author and illustrator of a series of Yiddish-inspired picture books, including Schmutzy Girl, Nashi Boy, Schluffy Girl, Kvetchy Boy, Klutzy Boy, Bobby and Zaid, and Hanukkah with Nashi Boy and Friends. For the listeners out there, I went to Google and I listened to many of these words, so excuse me if I don't pronounce them the correct way. Asner tours annually, reading, educating, and entertaining thousands of kids throughout North America. She holds a BA from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and an MA from Brandeis University. She's an alumna of the Jewish Federation's Master Class in Entertainment and the UCLA Writers Program. She is one of 5 grandchildren to a Yiddish-speaking Babi. Asner resides in Los Angeles, California, and we are honored and we welcome you to Magical Books for Kids.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm sure that was a mouthful, I guess, for people who didn't grow up with these words, which is part of the purpose of the books. It's a bit of a tongue twister, these little Jewish 7 dwarfs, the Schmutzy and Kvetchy and Schluffy.
Right, I went to Google and I put the words in and I hit how to pronounce it. And there was some extensive dialogue referring to Babi, which is basically grandmother, right? That's the word for grandmother. And Zaid is the Yiddish word for grandfather.
That's Zaidi, yeah.
Zaidi, okay.
And of course, if it's Jews and dialogue, there's gonna be dialogue. So is it Bubba or Bubby? And is it spelled with I-E or just E? Or is it spelled with 2 O's? I mean, it's translated from Yiddish, so there's no real standard, but we do the best we can.
Right, and they pronounce it different ways. They at one point they said it was Zaid, and then they went into another pronunciation, and then with Barbie, that was Barbie, and then Barbie, and so it was very interesting to me. It was just fascinating. So the point being is, it fascinated me so much. Now I have to read all your books. So, so as a child, what particular books were you inspired by? I'm sure now that you've written these books, many people are being inspired by what you've written.
Oh, thank you. I certainly hope so. One quick note about the pronunciation. The first edition came out with no pronunciation cues, and then somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, would you mind putting any kind of a pronunciation log in the book?" So that was feedback from an actual reader. So since then, every edition has had like a glossary of terms in the back and actual pronunciation key. So that's so that you don't have to Google how to pronounce them. It's all written out for you.
So that's great. So it's not only a wonderful book, but it's an educational device that you've put in there too. So that's sort of like makes the book even more magical. So were there any particular books, though, that you were interested in as a child? Did you read any particular author or any kind of series?
So as a child, well, I kind of feel like I still am a child, despite having children of my own. So the authors that speak to me most honestly, Judy Blume was hands down my favorite author pretty much my whole life, and still to this day. She is a personal hero of mine, how she's been able to really, get into the hearts and minds of kids, and as a grown-up, write from their point of view. So Judy Blume is definitely a favorite. In the picture book space, my books were actually inspired by the Roger Hargreaves series of Mr. Men and Little Miss books. I thought that they were so cute. I have a ton of them. I have them in English, I have them in Hebrew, I think I might have them in French even. Like I love those books where each character just has a central attribute that's that character. Like Mr. Happy is happy, and that infuses everything he does. And Little Miss Famous, her whole life is, how do I get famous? And they each have their own kind of shtick, to use a Yiddish word, that they kind of live in and don't die by, but they live by. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be cute to do something like that with Yiddish? So instead of it being like Little Miss Schmutzy, we have Schmutzy Girl, and she's always getting dirty and getting into messes and really just embracing life, with both hands. But with that comes a little bit of schmutz.
So what was the reasoning that you wanted to get involved with this particular series? Why you wanted to teach Yiddish and basically educate another group of generation?
Yeah, well, my booby, so my grandma spoke fluent Yiddish. My mom understands it, and I don't know, 50, 60. If you count food, I might know 80 words, because there's a lot of food that's Yiddish, like bagel. People don't know that that's it. In fact, my kid the other day was like, I didn't know bagel was a Yiddish word. I'm like, yes, bagel is a Yiddish word. So I know probably about 80 words. And with that rate of dilution, my thought was, okay, what's the next generation going to know? 2 words? Or they'll be like my kid, who doesn't know that Yiddish words are actually even from Yiddish. And the thought was that we have this old country culture, that is big and robust, but it's very difficult to kind of transmit to that size of it and the magnitude of it to the new generation. So kind of in the spirit of Judy Blume, like, what can I give to the new generation to meet them where they are? So I'm like, okay, picture books. They're a great entryway, to this very vibrant and vast culture. Or so I'm like, okay, I can give each character a name, and Nashi Boy's always eating, and Klutzy Boy's clumsy, and Schliffy Girl is always sleepy, and use that as kind of a very early, kind of fun, silly, joyful Yiddish primer for the youngest of kids.
You mentioned the word bagel. See, I just learned something. No, I did not know bagel was a Yiddish word. And being from New York, if you can tell by my accent,
A little bit.
yes, I lived in New York for like 57 years of my life. Bagels were big. I mean, I could say I had a bagel probably every week, and I had no idea that was a Yiddish word. So that is certainly something that not only kids can learn, but also adults as well.
Exactly that. Like Essa Bagel, or the like unbridled prompt, like pitch. Essa bagels are the best bagels on the planet, and they're in New York. And S means eat. Essa Bagel, eat a bagel. That's the name of the bagel place.
Well, let's talk about all your books. First of all, you mentioned a little bit about the Schmutzy Girl, which is basically a girl who is always dirty or getting into messes and everything like that. And you're also the illustrator as well in this particular series. So you are multi-talented. I wish I could draw. I can draw stick figures, but I can't draw anything else besides that. So I kind of admire your skill level.
Well, that's very kind of you. I was
Yeah.
actually kind of bullied into doing the art.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yes, I consider myself a writer, not an illustrator, except I guess for the 60,000 books I have in print. For those, I'm an illustrator, but I don't outsource my illustrating skills. Basically, I'd hired a couple of different illustrators, and they either didn't do anything close to my vision for it, or didn't finish. And my husband said to me, who's now an accountant, so you got to understand where he comes from too. He's like, first off, how are you going to split zero with anybody? Because I was just starting out with Schmutzy Girl. And he said, also, they don't need to be Chagall. This is art for kids. And then I remember years later, we were watching the Kennedy Awards with Mel Brooks on there. And apparently for the producers, he had a similar experience with his wife, where he'd written all of the lyrics, but he didn't want to do the music. He's like, I'm not a composer. I'm a comedian. I'm a writer. And his wife said to him, kind of like, well, who's going to write your music but you? Who's better fit? And it's that same sensibility. So my husband essentially said to me, which is probably the tagline of our household, is figure it out, So they're very simple, very clean drawings, and honestly, it is so difficult for me to do them that I can't think about anything else. I can't like chew gum while I'm illustrating those. But yes, I did end up doing the illustrations, and honestly, that's probably the part that brings me the most joy now, being like, oh my goodness, there's a levity to art that isn't, at least for me, isn't in writing. Writing is my profession, but art is like a bonus gift.
Right. Have you always been someone as a child that drew or illustrated or scribbled? I mean, I scribbled, but it wasn't anything close to anything that we've hired or that I've seen out there.
No, I've never been an illustrator. It was
Okay.
really out of necessity,
Mm.
not having a budget, and also being pushed by my then boyfriend, my now husband, saying, you know what, why not you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really like a very, very powerful message. Why do any of us think that someone else can better represent us than we can represent ourselves? So it was really, and if you look through the books, Schmutzy Girl art is a little bit more basic, a little more rudimentary, fewer details. The color palette's a little less refined. And then you look at the Booby and Zadie book, which is, book 7 in the series, and it's definitely evolved. And you look at Mickey Mouse, and it's a very, not that I think that I'm Walt Disney, but like if you look at Mickey Mouse and you look at very early mouse drawings, they're very, very rough. Or Charles Schulz, look at the very early Charlie Brown, they're very rough, and he didn't go back and fix them, fix in quotes, as he continued and evolved, and there's still like a brand consistency and an ethos consistency, but he started where they started where they were and improved. And so the illustrating has been a really, really fulfilling part of the journal, to be like, oh my goodness, I drew that.
You mentioned how it evolved. It's like anything else. When I wrote my first novel, I look at it, the first draft of it, and I run away from it. And then I look at the next novel, and it's so much better. And as you go along, you become a better writer, and and in your case, became a better illustrator. So to me, that's phenomenal. I mean, as you said, it was out of necessity. I mean, it could have been out of necessity for me, but I wouldn't be able to do it. So congratulations on handling both. I admire people who can do both. So how was the process of Schmutzy Girl? So this is your first book, correct? In the series? Okay, so how was that? It was the first one. It's new. How did you feel through the process? How long did it take? Were there any problems that you came across, like most of us do? And what was the feeling when you first saw the book? That's the real fun part.
So the process was so multifaceted. So first off, because as I mentioned earlier, I was definitely inspired by the Little Miss and Mr. Men books. The first version, not published, of Schmutzy Girl is very much in that kind of bubble, no arms, arms and legs, but no real body, just a bubble style of Roger Hargreaves. And my graphic artist, she's like, you might want to check with a lawyer that you're not going to get sued. So the first one was called Little Miss Schmutzy, and looked like it was like a spoof on the Hargreaves books. And I went and talked to a lawyer, and he's like, you could probably weasel your way out of it, but why do you want to do it that way anyway?
Mm-hmm.
And they were the little square books. So we changed the size and shape of the book, really kind of revisited how the characters would look, and Little Miss Schmutzy became Schmutzy Girl. So there was an evolution just in terms of, okay, is this a brand and a product that's going to stand on its own, or is it meant there to parody someone else's? So that was a cognitive shift, and I'm very, very happy that happened. In addition, I have 2 dads. One of my dads owned a printing company at the time, and so he lent me his graphic artist for free for the first 5 books. So Schmutzy Girl, Nashi Boy, Schlippy Girl, Klutzy Boy, and Kvetchy Boy. The services were donated to me as an act of love and support.
Wow, that's nice.
Yes, it's really, really nice to be supported by people who love you. Yeah, so to this day I use the same graphic artist. Now I pay her. So Hanukkah with Nashi Boy and Friends, Bubby and Zadie, that same graphic artist, and even Kibbutzy Girl and Schleppy Boy are press ready. And so same graphic artist. I won't work with anybody else. She's wonderful. But that built that relationship. And then other stuff about the Schmutzy Girl book is that on the back of even the very first edition of Schmutzy Girl, so my other dad, I'm apparently very influenced by my dad's, said to me, "Hey, Anne Marie, why don't you put the book covers for the next 4 books on there, or for the next 3 books, or whatever you want the series, what your vision is for the series, so that you're already putting it out there as something to grow into." And I very, very firmly believe that there is power in vision. So even I didn't have an office at the time, I just had a desk. I even printed out the book covers of this next 4 books and framed them and put them up like, this is what my intent is to grow into. But for Schmutzy Girl, I did not even have a budget. Like, this came out of my pocket. So my printer dad printed it at cost, donated the graphic artist service. I kind of cobbled together money and just figured if I could sell them, I'd go on to the next book. And so after 6 months, I sold out of the first run of Schmutzy Girl. I took it as a sign that I guess Nashi Boy should be given some life. But there were definitely, like I said, there was like art redo, it was the first, I mean, also for the first book, that's where you got to brand everything. So I needed the company logo for Matzo Ball books. I needed, where's the title going to be? Do I have a promo page at the back of the book? Is this perfect bound or staple bound? I needed to make all of those decisions early on, because Matzo Ball Books is a DIY enterprise. I started it on my own, and 17 years later, I've had like different distribution partners and many people in the field who are kind enough to help promote and sell. But yeah, it's a one woman shop plus my intern.
So you're 17 years in doing this. So you're
Yes.
you're a veteran, and you've had a lot of experiences. Now, is Schmutzy Girl, is that you as a child, or or were you somebody?
No,
No, you didn't get
I'm
yourself dirty. No.
it's actually my sister. I'm definitely Schliffy Girl, not just
Okay.
as a child, as a grown up. I give me a good nap and I'm the happiest person. A book and a nap and I'm good to go.
Right. Okay. So Slumpy Girl is about napping, I guess, right? This is what it is. Could you just give a little synopsis of what that book is about? To me, that's
Yeah,
very
sure.
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, each book has
Yeah.
a universal lesson. Like, the goal was to make this kind of Yiddish pop culture available for everybody, not just
Mhm.
for Jews, for everybody. Like, I think of like Seinfeld, he would use like funny Jewish-ish like humor,
Right.
but is made for the mass market.
Hmm.
So these books do not, aside from the Hanukkah book, which is clearly like a seasonal special, these books do not have Jewish content above the use of Yiddish words, which language is culture. But so Schliffy Girl, her book, she learns that there's a time and place for everything. So like napping, sleeping is probably good for napping at nighttime, but not in the middle of the playground when Klutzy Boy can fall over her, and not at Fetchy Boy's birthday party where he's clearly going to complain about it. That there's a time and place for most everything. So that's kind of the universal lesson for Schliffy Girl.
That's too bad. Seinfeld should endorse your books. And then you would have so many runs on that one. Because when you mention that, he does inject Jewish humor, but it's mainstream, and it allows for people to see another culture. And so to me, it's not only funny, but it's also endearing in that sense, which what your books sound like. So your last book was Hanukkah with Nashi Boy and Friends. Can you just talk about that particular book, since that's your last one, and when did that one come out?
Actually, the Booby and Zadie book is the most recent book that
Okay.
came out, but I'm happy to talk about both of them or either of them. It's up to you. So
Yeah, but talk about the latest one, the one that's the one that's coming out next, or is already out.
So the Booby and Zadie recently came out during COVID, and
Mhm.
it was actually supposed to come out after Kibbutzy Girl, who's always joking around, and Schleppy Boy, who's always hauling something somewhere. That both of those are part of a Kickstarter campaign that we have going on right now. But I switched their order because so many grandparents didn't have access to grandkids, and grandkids didn't have access to grandparents. And so I felt that there was really a need for something that highlighted the very special relationship between grandparents and grandkids, and the importance of unconditional love for like a growing soul in the world. And that, like Kvetchy Boy's hanging out with Bubby and Zadie, and every time they look at like Klutzy Boy break a window or break something, they're like, oh, he's so helpful. And Kvetchy Boy's like complaining, like, how can you look at him helpful? He's only cleaning up his own destruction. Or Nashi Boy is so appreciative as he like eats them out of house and home. And Kvetchy Boy's like, how can you look at Nashi Boy as appreciative? The guy eats like a pig, like, and Schliffy Girl, Bubby and Zadie, like the grandparents think she's so independent. Kvetchy Boy's complaining, she's sleeping on the floor, like you're tripping over her. Why do you think she's independent? And the point of the Bubby and Zadie book is that when you love someone, you look for the good, right? And particularly, I know it goes across many cultures, but there's particularly this very heimische, to use a Yiddish word, this very homegrown grandparent grandkid bond where kind of almost the grandkids can do no wrong. And it may be infuriating to like the Kvetchy Boys of the world, but it is absolutely empowering and builds the next generation of people.
That's a wonderful message, and that's something that, as you mentioned, I'm not a grandparent yet, but I'm sure it's wonderful. And I see it all the time. People just like they're just so in love with their grandkids. Now, what did your kids think of your books? Did you run it past them, or it was a lot of times I find that the authors, they run it past their kids and see what their thoughts are first before they put it out there. What was the process for you?
So the first 5 books were out before I had kids.
Okay.
And then since then, like my kids are very involved, in particular with the Schleppy Boy book. My son is like, that's me. That's my book. Why isn't it out yet? And I even printed him out a copy so he could have one. No, it's not enough. He wants that book in the hands of little kids worldwide because he loves it. It's about him. And really the kind of the universal message in Schleppy Boy is that sometimes more is less, right? If we're spending all of our time like gathering stuff and bringing stuff and buying stuff and packing stuff, we're actually having less time to be present and actually hang out with the people who love us. So, and then Schleppy Boy does get the last line that kind of some things are worth the schlep,
Nice.
But so yeah, he's definitely very involved. And my daughter's Kibbutzy Girl is somewhat about them, or at least dedicated to them. They're very funny and they like to joke around. And it's kind of, Kibbutzy Girl is more about finding the right avenue for your talents. Like hers is joking around and making people happy, kind of like what's yours, and figuring out how to exploit that and expand that and exploit in the best sense of the word, as in like maximize it.
Now, do you have a plan for the next few years? I noticed that a lot of authors who do series, they have a list that they want to get to, and they add to it as they go along. Do you have a list of books that you want to add to this particular series? And if so, what are they and when are they coming out?
The never-ending list, right?
Right, exactly.
The list will be there till I'm like 6 feet under. We'll still have that.
Right.
That
It's,
list.
as long as you can draw and write, you're going to be adding to the list.
Well, Kibbutzy Girl and Schleppy Boy are both press ready, but publishing industry has changed quite a bit in the last 17 years. So we're busy raising the funds to be able to put those out, but they're ready to go. I can hit go tomorrow as long as I can pay the printer. So those are definitely the 2 that are next coming out. Then we have Kepi Girl, and Kepi or Kop in English is head. So Kepi is like an endearing word for head, and she's super smart because she's always using her head. So that one, the illustrations are done, but they're with my magician / graphic artist to make them beautiful and put them together. So those are the next 3 books in the lineup. I do have thoughts. I've not yet committed to them. So of doing kind of a spin-off series where it's like Sleepaway and summer camp is very, very is a big thing, kind of, at least in North America. is that Schmutzy will go to camp, and she kind of gets into all these messes, but she really gets to experience the full breadth and beauty of what it means to have the freedom and self-expression of camp. And I do want to do one that Nashi Boy goes to Israel, and he just like eats his way through the country, and it's kind of an introduction to Israel and the wide variety of Jewish food, because Israel is actually by far the most diverse place I've ever been. It has everything from like Ethiopian, to Eastern European, and like my husband's half Moroccan, half Libyan. So all of these cultures kind of brought their food with them. So it's not just kind of like a food survey of Israel. There's in many ways it's like a global food survey of the diaspora.
So I didn't even know that either. I didn't realize Israel was so diverse with the food. Obviously, I grew up in New York, so I was kind of used to that there was all types of food in Manhattan. Whenever you went into Manhattan, you could have anything you wanted. So that's impressive. So that's another thing that I've learned today during this interview. So thank you so much for educating me on that. Now, if people want to find your books, okay, could I go to Amazon and buy if I'm a Prime member, or Barnes and Noble, or are those places have your books? Because I know you have a website as well.
Yes, you can go to Amazon.com. Really, the best pricing you're going to get is matzahballbooks.com. MATZAH ball books with an S. So matzahballbooks.com is the only place that has book set pricing. So, and honestly, most people buy these books as a set. I'll often get a call like, hey, someone gave us one, we want the rest of the set. How do we get the rest of the set? And also like onesies and plate sets and other merchandise is only available at matzahballbooks.com.
So do you have like a bundle that people can buy, if they can get the whole set for a certain price, as opposed to buying one or two or whatever?
Yes, absolutely. We have a bundle we have a seasonal bundle that includes the Hanukkah book, and we have a non-seasonal bundle for people who don't feel the Hanukkah vibe in July.
You also mentioned to me that you had an audio book. Is that correct? And that you had a really famous person do one of the voices. Could you talk about that? Because when you told me, I went, wait a minute. And then it hit me that the particular voice you had was actually in one of the most famous Pixar movies, Up.
Yes, I think he got the first animated voice award. Like there's some award that they created for him for that voice. And for Up, the role was created for my dear friend Ed Asner. We met because we have the same last name. As far as I know, we're not related. I don't know. We still have lunch. I'm having lunch with him at the end of the month. So
look at that. Isn't that incredible though? Okay. You don't know if you're related. It's just the last name. And the first thing I thought was maybe she's related to him because she got him to do a voice. I mean, that's incredible. But now speak about that, the voice and everything, and about the book.
Yeah, he's great. Ed is wonderful. And as we say in Yiddish, he's like the ultimate mensch. Like I'll be at his house and people call and they talk to him about all kinds of stuff and spend his time. And he's so giving and generous. He's very grumpy. Like when I walk into a house, the first thing he usually says to me is like, what do you want? What are you doing here? And I'm like, I brought lunch, and I'm just like, as long as I keep like smiling and like, he's like, hey, sweetheart, how you doing? He definitely, like, the sign on his door says like, don't mind the dog, beware of the owner. Like he's definitely like he's a little prickly and is the biggest softie ever. So we met, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. We met a long time ago where I reached out to his agent and said, and I knew his grandkids had my books because his sister had bought them for him, and she'd reached out to me about family tree, like, are we related? So I had some contact with his family over the years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I reached out to his agent and said, hey, I'm just wondering if Ed's interested in what another Asner is doing in this town, because we both live in Los Angeles. Like within hours, he called me. He's like, yeah, he was great. He's like, where do you live? I'm like, Santa Monica. And he's like, you're gonna have to come to me. I'm like, okay. He's like, I can't do dinner tonight. I can do it tomorrow. Like, I hadn't even said hello. He's like already telling me when he can and cannot have dinner and what part of town.
My goodness, he sounds, as you're describing him, like the character in Up, and he sounds like the character in like Mary Tyler Moore, the grumpy guy, but with the soft heart, you know?
Yeah, he's wonderful. He's wonderful.
Wow, what an incredible story. And I said, what an incredible series you have. So if people want to get a hold of you, they can certainly Google your name, but the easiest way to do is matzahballbooks.com. You get a better deal there, and you get a bundle price as well, because all these books are worth educating, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish. To me, I wish I had these books growing up, but now I will buy these books and certainly share these books with people I know that do have kids as well. So congratulations on such a wonderful series.
Thank you so much. And yeah, and particularly now in this like age of diversity, right? And having representation, having people, all kinds of people be seen. I do think that it's that much more important to have Jews be seen also, that we are kind of one of the invisible minorities, and it's nice to kind of, you know, the way Seinfeld did kind of brought it,
right,
at least the joy and funny of Jewish to mainstream. That is my intent to do for kids.
Well, congratulations, and you are doing that. So Anne-Marie Asner, thank you so much for joining us on Magical Books for Kids. This is a free podcast, and you can hear it on every platform, including Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, as well as our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. So thank you so much for joining us this week.
Michael, it's been a great pleasure and a joy, and thank you so much for inviting me, and keep up the great work. You have amazing authors, and your podcast is really a gift to the community.
And you are one amazing author as well as an illustrator. So congratulations on doing both. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Bubby and Zadie by Anne-Marie Asner.
Bubby and Zadie are so proud of their grandkids and often quell and praise each of their greatest qualities.
Klutzy boy really is so helpful,
said Zadie. Our schmutzy girl, I've never seen such enthusiasm, added Bubby. Zadie responded,
Nashi boy sure is appreciative.
Bubby exclaimed, We can always count on Schluffy girl to do what she thinks is best.
I'm so glad they're coming over today,
gushed Zadie. The house is stocked and ready, beamed Bubby. With heartfelt love, the kids burst in to hug and greet their grandparents. Hi, Bubby, hi, Zadie, they cheered before heading off to their favorite parts of the house. In the backyard, Zadie pitches several balls to Klutzy boy until, crash! Klutzy boy hits the ball straight through the window. Oops, I'll get the broom, said Klutzy boy, ready to put right his latest clumsiness.
That's my Klutzy boy, so helpful,
quelled Zadie. Helpful, said Klutzy boy, stunned. Bubby checks in on Schmutzy girl, who has mounted a massive mural on the wall. How do you like my art project, Bubby? asked Schmutzy girl, covered with paint and glue. I love your excitement, Schmutzy girl, said Bubby, leaving behind a bucket and a sponge. She'll need more than soap and water for cleanup, Fetchy Boy grumbled to himself. In the kitchen, Nashi Boy exclaimed between mouthfuls, This food is delicious! World's best nosh!
And best nosher, so appreciative,
said Zadie. He'll eat anything, muttered Fetchy Boy. Retiring to the living room for a break, Bubby and Zadie nearly stumble on Schluffy Girl, fast asleep on the floor. Schluffy Girl certainly is independent, said Bubby, taking a seat on the couch. Fetchy Boy complained. All she does is sleep.
Would you like to join us, Fetchy Boy?
said Zadie, settling in next to Bubby. Fetchy Boy paces infuriated. I don't get it. Klutzy Boy is super clumsy, yet you see him as helpful when he's tidies his latest breakage. Schmutzy Girl is head to toe messy, yet you see her as excited. Nashi Boy eats non-stop, yet you see him as appreciative. And Schluffy Girl sleeps anywhere, yet you see her as independent,
That's very observant of you, Quetchy boy.
said Zadie. Yes, a sharp mind on that one, quelled Bubby. I'm not being observant, I'm kvetching, said Quetchy boy, exasperated. Quetchy boy, it's easy to see people's flaws, said Bubby,
But when you love someone, you look for the good.
said Zadie. Confused, Quetchy boy asked, like a sharp mind? See, very smart, said Bubby. Tired out, Zadie yawned.
Oi, now I need to call the window repair company because of Klutzy boy, and the house cleaner because of Schmutzy girl.
And I need to restock the fridge from Nashi boy, said Bubby, exhausted. Perhaps after you follow a Schluffy girl's lead and get some rest, said Quetchy boy. Good idea. That's our brilliant Quetchy boy, said Bubby,
A sharp mind, I tell you.
said Zadie. I told you, said Bubby. Before they can say another word, Bubby and Zadie are snoozing on the couch. Quetchy boy smiles and tucks them in. Brilliant, huh? Beamed Quetchy boy. I guess Bubby and Zadie quells are nothing to kvetch at. While Bubby and Zadie rest, the grandkids use their helpfulness, excitement, appreciation, and independence to put the house back in order. Not too klutzy a job, said Klutzy boy, admiring their efforts. Schmutzy girl answered, but still not quite the same without Bubby and Zadie's special touch. Neither are we, said Quetchy boy, first in line for a hug before heading home.
For more about this book and others, please visit matzahballbooks.com.
We'll see you again next week. And again, I'm Michael John Sullivan for Magic Everywhere INC. This is a Magical Books for Kids free podcast. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.